Well, welcome to the Profit by Design podcast, Ryan. It's great to have you with us.
Dr. Sabrina, Friday morning. It's a beautiful morning in Minnesota. I'm very excited to be hanging out with you.
Yeah, right before Labor Day weekend when we're
Yeah.
recording this. So
Yes.
good. Do you have any fun plans for the weekend?
I celebrated my kid's last daycare day today. So I have twin girls that are turning 6 in like 2 months, and I now just have a huge surplus in my monthly budget because there's no more daycare.
That's
and
awesome.
So my wife was like tearing up, and I'm like, woo! So,
no, now it's time to save for college.
Yeah. So wait a second, we're supposed to save that money. Okay, not
no. Go have some fun. But I tell you, I remember when my youngest, we celebrated the last of the daycare too, and it is a big deal. But then I have my oldest who is going to go to college in 2 years, or it's 3 years, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy got here so fast.
I know.
And
so
then it's crazy.
Yeah, it's like yes, the chapters. That was my first experience, Dr. Sabrina, of like the chapter, flipping the page. Yeah. It was just super fascinating from a parental perspective.
Yeah, well, you guys are going to have a fun weekend ahead as you celebrate that. So I want to formally introduce you to our audience. And before I do that, I want to give a little background about why I invited you on as a guest, because we're very selective about our guests that we bring onto the Profit by Design podcast. So this podcast is really designed to bring the best thought leadership around business to our small business owners who listen to the podcast. And so I want to make sure that as we're bringing you information on the podcast, that we're bringing you guests who have something that is maybe a stone you've never turned over in your strategic planning and your thinking about your business. And that's certainly what Ryan brings to our conversation here on the Profit by Design podcast. So I'm going to share your bio. This is Ryan Tansom. He started his entrepreneurial career at his family business, where he was the executive VP and responsible for the strategic, operational, and financial strategy of the $21 million company. Ryan helped turn the company around and bring intentional focus to the right strategies, which enabled it to be sold for 8 figures to a local competitor in 2014. Ryan took his experience and founded Arcona with his partner, Pat, to create the intentional growth framework, which helps owners grow the value of their company with an end in mind by helping them view and run their company through educational training, fractional CFO services, and strategic planning. Ryan also hosts the popular Intentional Growth podcast that has 310 plus episodes, 420,000 plus downloads, and guests like Gino Wickman, John Warrelou, Mike McAllowitz, some of you might have heard of him, and editors of popular publications like HBR and Inc. magazine. Ryan also has a passion for speaking and delivers frequent keynotes. After thousands of meetings and hundreds of podcast interviews, he has his finger on the pulse of the market like few others. So, Ryan, it's wonderful to have you with us.
Whoever wrote that should get paid a couple bucks. They made me seem way too cool.
That's a great bio. So you and I have had some previous conversation, and you've shared with me some of the background of your story and the things that you've learned through the years, which I think is so incredible, because when you sell a business, there's a lot of surprises, including how things are going to go and what things are going to be like afterwards. So let's just start there with, what did you learn as you grew that business, got it ready for a sale, and after it was sold?
Yeah, there's about 400 hours worth of podcast interviews of all the things that we could have done differently if people want to go figure out more of the lessons. Dr. Sabrina, so just a little cliff note on the actual business. So my dad started it in the early 90s, mortgaged our house, bought a couple $100,000 worth of Panasonic copiers. And, I was part of that whole ride. As a kid, I got the play-by-play, and he hit the 20 million and 115 employees while I was doing interns and working in the business. And so when I started in 2009, the company was in distress. We lost close to 7 figures that year. He had been very distant from the company. So the 6-year run that I had at the company was turning the business around. So like, you name the challenge or problem, from finance to people to operations to locations to products to service, you name it. We went through it and then ended up selling it. But like, I'd say like and there's a lot to unpack there, but one of the biggest lessons that I am I've spent about almost a decade now in trying to help people understand is the number one thing that I think that we didn't understand. One is we didn't know what we wanted from the business and why, which is a huge issue. The second thing is that we didn't focus on growing equity value in the business. So we even though it was 20 million in revenue, we treat it like a lifestyle business by solving for annual income and cash flow versus focusing on growing the equity value of the business to create choices for both of us. And then the third thing that was the big takeaway is we didn't have the financial clarity to view and run the company like a financial asset, which then we didn't have a strategic roadmap for all the ideas that we wanted to think through. How we didn't have a framework to say, hey, if we wanted this much equity valuation in a point in time, how does that impact our strategic plan to fund it, our distributions, and our taxes? We had no way to think about that stuff. So kind of just bumbled around, sold it, and here we are.
Yeah. And so as you had that experience, you realize there's a huge need because you're not the only business owner who goes through that. And there's so much learning when you sell a business, and it's really painful because you look back and you think, well, if I had known all this, I would have done it differently. So hindsight's 2020. What would you have done differently?
I wish we would have. Well, I mean, that's the reason we built this business, and I feel blessed, and I think that's kind of how you feel about your organization. That I built the business I wish we would have been able to work with, and it was I didn't know what the hell we were doing. I knew how to sell. I knew how to sell copiers, sell IT services. It was revenue, gross profit, checking account. And Mike always talks about this in his books. And it's like that way we were doing bank balance accounting.
Yeah.
And it was just go sell more stuff. We had a record year. We had a record month, but it was revenue, gross profit. And so like it was just, we didn't know. Finance was, I teach finance and I have a fractional CFO business, and accounting was my worst grade in college. So when you say like, what was it? It wasn't, at 20 million, we were attracting, pretty heavy hitters of advisors, people that I think are good people, but there was no cohesive plan because my dad and I didn't know what we wanted. We didn't know what we wanted, and we didn't know the financial targets that we were moving towards. So everybody's just kind of guessing. And like every day we wake up and, hey, someone's got to hire a really expensive executive, or they're going to launch a new product, or maybe buy their building. What's the framework to decide whether that's the right choice or not?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we all want to know whether this is worth it. So going back to your question of like, what did we wish what could I have done differently? One is know how and understand how to view and run the company like a financial asset, and then have a framework to use a framework for decision making that's based in financials, right? Because a lot of visionaries, I'm a visionary, I can burn a lot of capital with no return and a lot of headaches. Yeah. And I wish I would just have someone say, don't do that. Or by the way, if you do that, here's the implications of your decisions.
Right. Well, and that's the piece. If you really want to do this, this is what it's going to look like. And this is the long-term
100%
impact of that. So we have business owners listening. And I think it's so important. One of the things you and I connect on is we need to know the end in mind, and we need to be strategic and taking that straight path to get there. Otherwise we go into the survival trap, and we take these actions that look like on the surface, they're kind of aligned with what we want, but they get us very far off course. And that's that visionary energy that can really get in there and wreak havoc. And so why is it so important to get clarity as a business owner on what we really want from the business, from your perspective?
I'll answer you, but so I'm going to flip this and ask you a random question. So, hey, Dr. Sabrina, should I buy a cabin?
I don't know, Ryan. Depends on what you want, because in my mind, immediately, I'm a bad person to ask that question.
Yeah, you're really good at asking questions, right? So you probably would get to the root of that. I was doing that to just really hammer home, like, you're going to ask probably financial questions. Can you afford it? Is he going to put your retirement off? By the way, if you guys already have 5 other cabins, you're going to spend no time there. Like maybe so there's a time element and there's a financial element. And then your enjoyment and your wealth is tied up into your decisions, because there's really only 2 constraints that we all have. If we're going to try and say the equalization is like, you have 168 hours each week, Dr. Sabrina, and so do I.
Mhm.
What are you going to do with that? And then what are you going to do with your capital and your energy? Right. I mean, we were
Yeah.
talking about Gino and Rob Dubay about the 10 disciplines of maximizing and managing your energy. That's the managing the 168 hours, making sure you're
Right.
having fun and you're applying that energy towards things that are going to get you towards your goals. And then the capital has to fuel, hopefully, equity in an asset, which is your company, and you have enough income along the way. And like, I don't know, does the cabin get me farther away or not? And I think, like, I'll tell you a story. I was talking to this woman who is a client of mine, a wonderful human being. She's got a social enterprise. She moves mountains for her employees. I mean, honest to God, it's ridiculous. And I was saying, hey, because she was asking, this is a very specific example. She was asking, she found this individual, which again, think about the book I was just reading, the leadership book, How to Hire the Best, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was just reading that, and she's networking. So she stumbled across this guy. Let's call him Jim. And Jim is amazing, and for all the reasons you talk about in your book. And so she's attracted this guy. He's willing to take a third of the pay, potentially, which is he's usually paid a lot, to slide into her organization to help her. So she sees, all these possibilities. I'm already working too many hours. I've got not enough people. He's the who, not the how, all these things. And she's like, but he'll take this, but for some equity. And I'm like, okay. Look at your face. I know, right? It's like, okay. So and we were just onboarding her to the CFO service. She went through the training like 2 years ago. So we don't have the perfect roadmap cleared out yet because we were working on that. But I said, if you wanted a $5 million equity valued business, not revenue, but $5 million of equity in your company, the asset in 2030, okay, we have to back into whether this is going to get you closer or further away. Like, so if it's, and I could get geeky on the numbers, but there's a certain cash flow, like the EBITDA, and then there's the multiple. Let's say it's $1 million in cash flow, and times the 5 makes the $5 million. There's a certain like revenue size company that has the $1 million in cash flow. And I was like, if you all of a sudden give him 25%, the company in 2030 has to be 25% larger in order for you to get your $5 million equity. And how does that impact your distributions along the way? I don't know.
Yeah.
It may be, and the whole theory would be is that you would get there faster, right?
Mhm.
And so she could maybe get her $5 million, not in 2030, but 2027.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. It's just like,
Right.
unless there's a point in time and a value from the financial base case,
Mhm.
then we say, well, now we run that scenario for the financial implications. And then you weigh that against her headaches. She's like, I'm miserable right now. And it's like, okay, well, we have to weigh the time and the misery against the financial implications. Her choice. I don't really care what she does. I want her to be happy. But there's a framework to think about it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you gave that scenario, because we business owners are presented with those kinds of opportunities frequently. They pop up. At least I hear about them as I'm coaching other business owners, and our clients will ask us about it. And you're absolutely right. There's so many considerations for what seems like a good decision in this moment, but it may not. It could take you very far off track of where you want to go down the road, or maybe it gets you there faster, but you have to really be strategic and know what you're going for in order to make those decisions in an informed way.
And you're running it against what you want. Going back, like, what do you want financially, emotionally, the life that you want to live? And because the whole reason we have a company is hopefully to make it all worth it, which is create wealth, enjoy work, and make an impact. We're all humans. And if you're not doing those things, you're going to probably feel like you're missing something. And I remember when I had a horrible executive bench at my old family business, and, you slowly start to turn around and you get one good person that makes the other people look bad. And so you're always like infatuated with the people that you're like, there was the chapter in your book where like, oh my God, I'm so guilty of it. Selling someone to come on board, and then you're totally you're over a barrel for the rest of the engagement.
Yes. Yeah.
And so and you're further away from your goals too. So it's like, all because you wanted to eliminate some headaches in your week.
Yeah. Well, so that piece is so important, because we have so many business owners who are listening who are in that place of being burnt out. 9 out of 10 business owners are experiencing symptoms of burnout. Mm-hmm. And when you're burning out and your business is growing, this is such a hard thing to wrap your head around, because you've worked so hard to get it where it is, but you're struggling emotionally. And as the business grows, you have more and more demands placed on you. And it feels like, wow, secretly, I wonder if I'm cut out for this. That imposter syndrome comes in. And so if we make decisions from a place of burnout, we might be solving for the wrong problem in our business. And we might take an opportunity or take an action that is just going to make things worse instead of making it better. So having that place where you just step back and really think about, well, what do I want?
Well, let's go back to the cabin. Like, of course, everybody's like, of course, Ryan, buy a cabin, right? Like, but they don't know any of the time constraints or the financial implications that. And let's say I wanted to just buy that cabin because in the moment, I haven't taken a vacation for a year and a half. I grew up going to Wisconsin for 20 years, Sabrina. So like, I have this nostalgia around cabins and lakes and pontoons and bonfires, and like, I love it. And so like, let's say I haven't taken a vacation in 18 months. I'm burnt out. I haven't rewarded myself for 18 months. So I'm like, and then if I find a good deal on Zillow while I'm sitting on my deck on Saturday, I'm like, let's buy a cabin. Next thing you know, now I have 2 HVAC systems, 2 plumbings. I got 2. Now I have twice as many headaches from a real estate perspective. And you know what I mean? Like, so there's the emotions that like, yeah, there's a lot of good reasons you should want this, but like, what are the implications? You may just made your situation twice as worse.
Right. And so that's why we always want to be just stepping back to what is it that we really want and connecting with that. So there's no doubt that running a business is a huge investment of time, energy, money. So in your opinion, Ryan, what is the number one thing that business owners can do to make sure that it's all worthwhile?
I think that I'm going to kind of weave together because you and I like a lot of the same philosophy. So like the 10 disciplines with Rob and Gino, 10-year thinking, I love the 10-year goals. 3 is too small. 3 and 5 are kind of just like in the motions. 10 years more of like an idea of what experiences that you want. And then you have the financial peg to say, hey, like here's like at least a scenario I can run things through that make this all worth it. And then for me, Dr. Sabrina, this is truly from my own experience, is I was running and managing a $20 million business we were a distributor and a value-added service provider. So we didn't use other people's money to grow our business. We used our own, and everybody used our flow, which means if I go buy $1 million worth of Canon copiers, I have to write the check. It takes 2 weeks for them to get to my warehouse. I do things to them, prep them, do all this stuff, then deliver them to the client. Then I invoice the client, and then it takes them 30 to 60 days to get me back my money. So it's like a 3-month, 4-month deal. I did that all through gut. That is insane. You talk about burnout. I think burnout comes from the lack of knowing the implications of your decisions, getting you further away from your goal or closer to your goal.
Yeah.
So like, it's this like, I know like this is what I want to accomplish to the company. And I know I need to fund that. And I need to then also have some income, pay my taxes. And I need to have an equity valuation at the end of the rainbow that makes it all worth it. And they don't have that decision-making. And this is I'll get to the point. It's all in the numbers. Yeah. And like I said, I was a copier salesperson and accounting was my worst grade in college. Unfortunately, I had to eat crow after selling the company going, at the end, it's all the truth is all there. No matter what, Apple has 3 financial statements, and so does the dry cleaner down the road. It is what it is. And so like, I just had to come to that realization and go, all of my anxiety can be ridiculously reduced if I can understand what the hell is going on in here to understand my decision-making process along the way.
Okay. So you start talking about, okay, it's all in the financials. And I know so many business owners when it comes to the financials, boy, talk about imposter syndrome. We're like, really?
Oh.
Like, yeah, our financials. Okay. So, and I know this was not your strong point either, but yet it's an area where you've really dug in. You've built a company around this. So what can you say to business owners whose anxiety goes up as soon as you start talking about, you've got to use your financials as a roadmap?
Everyone's like that.
Okay.
Period. End of story. underline, highlight, exclamation points. And here, other than just taking my word for it. So here's just my experience. And talk about imposter syndrome. I mean, my God, I'm sitting here going, wait a second. I was a copier salesperson with the worst grade of like as my accounting degree. Like, why? Like, everybody must know this, right? And it's just like, no.
No, they
And so
don't.
here's a couple of my like what I've kind of been like working on my thesis that has helped me just essentially reduce my imposter syndrome, kind of trying to make sense of it, is that we've gotten done with a 12-year bull run where everything went up.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as people had, were using a certain amount of cash flow to grow their companies, it was not as difficult. We have a lot of cross currents going on right now, from inflation to labor issues to supply chain issues to currency and interest rate issues. Like, I mean, it's not as easy. There's more turbulent times. So I think people are starting to realize how important decision making is, and they're kind of starting to lean towards the numbers. But the reason that I know so many people feel this way, I do keynotes all the time. I do Vistage workshops and EO workshops, peer groups and such. And you poll these people, and there's about 400 people that have been through our training. And if you go poll these audiences, like, I think the stat was like about 80 or 85% of Vistage members, which they're big companies for the most part, 85% of them don't budget. So like, I'm like, what the heck?
Wow.
And so you start to like, and then I'll raise, I'll do polls when we're doing our training or this or that. And it's like, you may find someone that does budgeting, but it's usually just the income statement and their checking account. Like, it is like a less, to the right of the decimal point, the amount of people that budget with all three financial statements, which the only thing that matters is like in the cash flow statement at the end of the day with the value of the company. And so like, people aren't just doing it. They're just not doing it. And so it's just super fascinating because I've got one of my theses, if this is a Venn diagram, and this is operations, like how to run a company, hire people, systems, processes, deliver goods and services. And this is finance. Finance is like private equity. You know what I mean? Like where people like buy companies to grow them and sell them. Bankers, accountants. There is very few people that know how to do both. So like you can get all the spreadsheet jockeys, but you're like, hey, why don't you go do an employee review? And if that person quits, you might not make payroll next week. And they're like, well, that's not in the spreadsheet in the rows and columns. So like,
yeah,
I'm being facetious a little bit, but like there's just very few people that know how to do both. So just so many people are in the exact same boat.
Yeah, that is so good to hear. And I hope those of you listening really are taking this in, that it's okay that you don't know. And this is the opportunity to get curious about what is it that I don't know, and start asking these questions without shame. And because the more you ask, the better informed you're going to be. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you, you have the intentional growth framework that you've developed to bridge, to be that center of that Venn diagram. What are the intentional growth principles?
So the intentional growth principles, Dr. Sabrina, came from my desire to take the complicated and make it simple. That's like one of my favorite things to do. I love to learn. And that came from me not knowing anything while I was doing everything in the business. So it was more of just like, that's where the answers were but the 5 principles, the purpose of them is to shift people's mindset away from viewing their company as a job to viewing it and running it like a financial asset, by helping them get clear on what they want and what their targets are. So that's the purpose of the 5 principles, is truly to bring context behind all of these topics that we're talking about. And how I realize that I learn is a lot different than school, but like I learn from context first down to very specific. So like, think about this as like the puzzle. Like, so you look at the picture is your vision of the puzzle. And then you have to put in the borders, and then you can figure out what process you want to put the puzzle pieces in. That's the purpose of the 5. And so the first one is, what are your drivers? What do you want from the business and why, essentially? The second principle is your financial targets. And there are 3 of them. What is your target annual income? What is your target net worth outside the business? And what is your target valuation in a point in time in the future? The third principle is your exit options. And it's not about selling your business, but it's about understanding how each exit option impacts your role, so your job, and the value of the business. So essentially when and how you get your money and what is expected of you as a person as it relates to that exit. So you can view your exit options through the lens of principle 1 and 2. So then you're like, oh, now I kind of get like what I want, what I can do, and how this all could unshake out. which leads us to principle 4, which is increase value. Grow the value of your business by creating sustainable, predictable, and transferable cash flow. And then the 5th principle is your team of advisors, which it's a lot easier to use all your advisors when you say, hey, by the way, here's where I'm going. Here's the financial targets. Here's why I want to do this. And here's how the strategies we're going to grow value. Now optimize the hell out of your plan. You don't have to be a technician that's technical knowledge in accounting or finance or legal or systems and processes and marketing and sales. You have to be the conductor.
Yeah.
But you can't do that if no one knows where the heck you want to go.
Yeah. So it all comes back to knowing what you want and what direction you want to go. So you talk about focusing on growing the enterprise value so that you have the freedom of choices in the future. Just let's break this down. What is enterprise value?
So there are 3 terms to really think of, and they kind of have like a hierarchy. So enterprise value is the value of your business. Think of like transaction costs. Like Dr. Sabrina, if I bought your company, we would have a purchase agreement and I would write like in that would be what is the enterprise value that I'm going to purchase your company at. The second level is equity value, which is just like your house. So if your house was worth $500,000, that would be enterprise value. If you had 400 grand in loans against it, you have the 100 grand delta, which is your equity. The business is exactly the same thing. That's why I say focus on growing equity value, because you could have a $10 million company and 12 million in debt. Like, woo, like you sell it, you're stuck with $2 million in debt.
Yeah.
So enterprise value, equity value. And then the third layer is net proceeds. If you sold the business, you have to pay taxes on that equity value. So every one of our clients knows every month what is the equity and the net proceeds potential if they sold their company. Like that's the decision-making framework. So those 3 are like essentially the 3 things to measure, and how you get to those numbers. You're usually taking cash flow, call it normalized EBITDA. We can get as technical as you want or as high level as you want, but cash flow times a multiple. So if it's $1 million in cash flow or EBITDA and you times it by a 4, because it's a 4 multiple, that's a $4 million valued company, which is the enterprise value. And all the 4 is, Dr. Sabrina, is how many years of cash flow a buyer is willing to give you based on the risk of your company. So if someone gets a 6, that means someone is like, hey, I'll give you 6 years of cash flow because you've built one hell of a company. It's very sustainable, transferable, and predictable. If it's a 2, it's like, hey, highly reliant on the owner, no systems, processes, really bad management team. We're going to give you 2. So you can have 2 companies that are both doing $1 million in cash flow. One gets double the value because of the company that they've built. But that multiple and then the EBITDA essentially get us to that enterprise value.
Okay, so this gets to the core of why I wanted you to come on the Profit by Design podcast, because we at Tap the Potential take business owners through the Tap the Potential solution. So they come to us at the point where the business is making sales and it's growing, and that poor business owner is so overwhelmed. It's just like,
been there.
Oh my goodness. And so we really put all that structure in place to create a business that gives them their life back. So, Profit First comes in and you get more money in your bank account than you've ever had before. And then we niche down around a clearly defined sweet spot. And so you get rid of really poor and distracting customers, and you learn how to innovate and add value for the top clients and customers, which creates margin, more money coming in.
Yes.
And meanwhile, that's the point where the business owners are kind of like, hey, this business isn't so bad after all.
Exactly.
I like this. Things are getting easier here. They fall back in love with the business. And then it comes to, well, you're still going to grow because now you have your clearly defined sweet spots. You need to hire. And everyone that I talk to has hiring PTSD. I have not encountered a business owner yet who's like, yes, hiring, that's my strength. I'm really good at that. That is so challenging because you don't learn this anywhere. And there's so many people skills involved in that. And so when you learn how to hire the best and you put a system in place, and by the way, 9 out of 10 business owners have no system to hire in their business. So I firmly believe that for those business owners who are overworked and overwhelmed, there's 2 systems you can put in your place that will change your life. And it is Profit First and hire the best.
Mm-hmm.
Life changing, but it's
Wait,
not.
so can I
the
interrupt
be
for a
all and
second?
done all.
So when we had our family business, we hired what we thought were CFOs based on, hey, they're going to go fishing and drink beer with us. Like, so that's not part of your process.
That's not how you hire the best.
And I will
fun to
validate
hang out with.
Yes, I will validate that to the 10th degree. Oh man.
Yeah, and what's so interesting to me is that when you have a business with a clearly defined sweet spot, and you learn how to hire these A players, you get people who are 9 to 10, 12 times more productive than your warm bodies. Mm-hmm. And when they're in the right roles. So your payroll decreases. And again, there's more money, there's more profit, and life is easier because you have great team members. So that's where putting more systems in place becomes even better, because now you have team members to support you, the business owner, in doing it. Because none of us business owners like to put systems in place either. Accounting and systems, that's business owners usually cringe. So when clients finish with the Tap Potential solution, they have a business that's given them their life back. They're able to go on vacation and fully unplug. But that's not the end of the road. That's just the beginning. Because now you have a business that has some value that somebody would pay more for and value more, because it's not dependent on the owner. And this is where I see our clients. We were getting clients through our Better Business, Better Life program. They're graduating, they're moving into our Ascension program, and we're start talking about exit planning. And there's all the questions that come up around that. And so I think it's so important to have you and really bringing this perspective on with respect to, you have lots of options.
What are we going to do with it?
Yeah. There's lots of options, and there's drivers for these decisions. So maybe let's go there about what are the main drivers, and why is it so important for business owners to know what those are for themselves?
So you're talking about the value drivers, right? In principle 4. So I want to put a pin in that for just 1 second, because I think there's this narrative that I think, so like when people get out of your program and they've now got some cash flow, and they don't despise this thing that they've created for the first time, like, hey, look, this is actually not too bad. So there's this philosophy, not philosophy. It's just that. So I get this call here. I'll get the point off over a story. So I get more calls each week, Dr. Sabrina, than I can count, of, hey, Ryan, I want out. How many times have you heard that? Right?
Yes.
So for years,
and it's like, when do you want to be out? And like yesterday, but maybe 5 years is probably more
and it's the rolling 5 years for sure. Yeah. So I, for years, would try and solve like whatever, but was behind that question. And now the first thing I just ask people, Dr. Sabrina, out of what? Your job or your financial asset? And they're like, what do you mean? Because I don't have people very often call me and say, Ryan, I want out. I've got mailbox money. I'm making $1 million a year. I don't have to call anybody and go to the beach a bunch. Well, because you got one hell of a financial asset that's kicking out cash that you're managing as an investor. Good for you. No one calls me and says that unless there's a financial risk in their industry and they want to monetize that asset because there's risk to the value that they've created. 9 times out of 10, someone says, I want out. It's because they're referring to their job, not their asset. So I bring that story up before we get to the 8 value drivers, because if you view and run your company like a financial asset, you realize that there's separation between your job and this asset. So you need to pay yourself market wages for the role that you have in the company, which is the profit first, right? You have to get to the point where you can pay yourself. And then you have this asset. And so you have to separate those two, because people need to view and run their company as a financial asset. And you can get out of your company from your job, and that's succession planning. But I wanted to give that kind of context, because now when we're looking at principle 4 about growing value, it's about reinvesting into the company to grow the equity value. And you can be a board member doing that. You could be you could be a receptionist, you could be an engineer, you could, whatever your job is, you can still sit on the board and have decisions about how to handle this asset. So principle 4, leading to growing value of this asset, the most important concept is to create sustainable, predictable, and transferable cash flow. Period. End of story. So I'm giving you some concepts before we jump into the 8 functional areas. Like I said, I started with context and we get into the technical stuff. Intrinsic financial value is the value of the company based on the cash flow. So if you got a stream of cash flow, someone places a risk profile on it and says, okay, well, this company is this risky because of these operational issues versus this one. I compare intrinsic financial value to intrinsic financial value to strategic transaction value, Dr. Sabrina. So like when I sold our company, we had 2 offers. One was over double the other one, because the one that we sold to, which is over double the other one, we gutted the entire company. So they had so many back office synergies that it wasn't really a cash flow valuation. It was, what will this person that is buying our company do with it for them to make the return? It's not a direct correlation to the cash flow. But we gutted the company. I had to fire 60 employees and my entire legacy was dissolved. That sucked. So I did not hit my first principal drivers, which led to the regret. So my point is, there was a set of circumstances that we had to monetize the company to someone that gutted it, versus basing the company value on the intrinsic financial value based on the cash flow. So a lot of people just run to this exit and then they realize that they haven't built a healthy based cash flow company. So the only option they have is to sell to a competitor, someone that's going to do whatever they want to do with it, essentially. Yeah. So I'm teeing up. Is this all making some sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep going.
As we look into principle 4, then the goal is to say, okay, we wake up, we've now got profit. We've now got good people. What the heck are they going to do every quarter, right? Like, what projects are we going to focus on? Is it the ERP system? Is it the website launch? Is it launch a new product? We have all these choices.
Yeah.
And we get into, people running EOS or OKRs, scaling up. I don't really care what it is. There's usually an operating system of weekly meetings, accountability, but there's this missing link that I have realized that, are you doing things that are growing the value of your company? Because if you're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and a lot of headaches, wouldn't it be nice to know, hey, it was worth it? So these 8 functional areas, Dr. Sabrina, they came from this guy named Ken Sanjanari. He's the creator of the value opportunity profile. John Warlow's got his 8 functional areas too. It's less important about the 8 functional areas. More so it is about creating sustainable, predictable, and transferable cash flow. So there are systems like Core Value or Value Builder System or this VOP that have different ways of identifying what are these functional areas and how do you enhance the sophistication and maturity in finance, in operations, in leadership, in legal, in strategic planning. So the concept behind these 8 functional areas is they all have to be relatively in balance, and then you need to grow them all together. And so, for example, we were a copier company, right? Rocking on sales, 400 phone calls, 15 appointments, 8 in the news, 5 proposals, 40 grand in revenue every single month for 25 years. Every dollar that we got back into the company went right back into sales. Wow. But we have no financial accounting reporting packages. How much do we have in inventory? How much we got in consumables? And every single technician car has got 80 grand worth of parts and consumables, and they're supposed to have 15. We couldn't keep selling our way to growth. We hit these because our financial function was so dilapidated. I don't know if that's the right word, but is that making sense? So the whole goal of these functional areas is to get them in balance, relative balance first, and then move them all up forward. And therefore, that's how it's the lens that you should be putting into your EOS system or whatever system you're running to say, this is why we're going to do this, because we need a new ERP system. It's going to be 200 grand. We're going to have these people do that. It's going to have less cash this year, but it's going to grow the multiple.
Yeah.
So it's just a lens that's saying, this is why we're doing what we're doing, to make it worth it, to get us towards that equity value in a point in time that we want in the future.
This is so fascinating to me, because really what you're doing is you're putting business owners at choice and giving clear guidance for if these are the choices that you make, these are the things that you want, here's how you get there. It's just like this is what you do. It
whatever it is that you want.
Yeah, it takes so much of the guesswork out. And I love what you said about the burnout, because we burn out because we're doing the things that we think are going to get us where we're going to go, but they don't. They just create more problems and headaches for us. And so having this clarity is so valuable. And so you have on your website at Arkona, you have some really good training, introductory training, and then there's the opportunity for people who want to go deeper. So I want to share with profit designers, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'm confused, there's a lot of things here that I didn't know. That's good.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the group.
Yeah. So, and that's good. And just be curious about it. Don't get overwhelmed, because the way that Arkona has broken this down on your website, it's so clear and it's tangible and it's easy to grasp. And so really take this opportunity to educate yourself. Go over to Ryan's site at Arkona, look at the trainings. And then if you want to go to that deeper level, you have opportunities, and there's different ways that people can engage. So what's your URL? What's the best way for them to find this information, Ryan?
I appreciate that, Dr. Sabrina. And like, again, I just want to reiterate what you said. Like, it took me 8 years to figure out that messaging, by the way. Not easy. So we got to talk about tuition payments. But I spent 8 years trying to make sure that we don't tell people what to do, and we're not outcome determinant. Yeah. Because like, you might want something completely different than me. Like, so that's the whole point, is like, it's a decision-making framework. Arkona.io, ARKONA.io. There's a financial checklist that we've got there, but like you said, there's videos, and the goal is that we start high level, and then it kind of, some of my favorite people that I like to learn from is like Ray Dalio, and, Gina Wickman, or, Bill Gates has got an interesting framework of how he thinks, where it's like, start with the context, and then once you understand the context, you can zoom in.
Yeah.
Because it has to make sense. You're like, oh, this one particular topic that I knew nothing about fits in all of this. So that's the whole goal of the 5 principles and the videos that you're talking about on the website.
Awesome. Yeah. So for those of you listening, if you are in that place where you're completely overwhelmed by your business, it's growing and there's too much responsibility on you, I want to let you know that we do have the Better Business, Better Life Jumpstart coming up at Tap the Potential. And you can go over to tapthepotential.com/jumpstart and get signed up for that. I will walk you through the Tap the Potential solution over the course of 5 days. This is a free training, and it's over Zoom. So we get to interact. You get to ask me questions. You get to say, hey, Dr. Sabrina, that piece that you just said, I don't get that. Can you help me, break this down for me? Or this is the struggle that I have in my business, and it feels like my business is different. That's my favorite one, is my business is different. Help me apply the Tap the Potential solution. And so you have that opportunity during the Jumpstart to do that. So for those of you who are in that place, that's a great place to start, because we're going to clean your business up and then you're going to be ready for what Ryan and Arkona have to offer. And Ryan, we also have our listeners who are much more advanced. They've gone through the Tap the Potential solution, and they're ready. They're looking for, well, I have this really cool business. It's doing great things. And what else can I do with it? For those of you who are in that place, it's time to talk to Ryan. It's time to really look at what Arkona has to offer and learn, because there's so much that you don't know. Take the opportunity to learn. So that's Arkona, ARKONA. I
was even thinking about it. And Dr. Sabrina, I wanted to offer something up for the listeners too. Like we've got a virtual training option, and then we actually have an in-person boot camp in Minnesota in the 2nd and 3rd of November at Bethel University. I'd offer up a 25% discount on either of those options. And I just thought about that so I'll get my marketing coordinator send you over, but I'll make sure that he does Tap the Potential as the coupon code. Okay. We'll put like a timeline on that or something like that for the listeners. But if people are interested, they're happy they can go check it out.
Absolutely. So we will get that in our show notes so that our listeners can take advantage of that. So thank you so much for being here with us, Ryan. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, I had a blast. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.